The wind came first, long before the people gathered, long before the hammer struck the crate she stood on. The wind whispered down off the red canyons and slid through Juniper Ridge like it was listening for something. It caught the edges of torn posters and old regrets, rattled the loose teeth of the saloon swinging doors, and made the church bell moan, though no one had pulled its rope. Noon, and the sun was cruel overhead, the kind of light that bleached bones and didn't care what name you were born with. She was small, barefoot, dust on her cheeks, hunger in her eyes. Couldn't have been more than 14. Black hair tied in a rag. Shirt too big, skirt too thin. She didn't cry. Just stood there atop a crooked crate in front of the old jailhouse, arms tucked behind her, eyes fixed on a point beyond the town. Maybe the hills. Maybe something she used to know. Behind her, the auctioneer cleared his throat. "All right, gents. This here's the last of 'em. Says her name's Lee. Something. Can't pronounce it." He gave a shrug that meant he didn't care to. "No papers, no English. One of them ship girls, I reckon. $3 starts the bid." No one moved. A tumbleweed skittered across Main Street and caught on a broken hitching post. The crowd gathered loose, miners, drifters, a few ranch hands passing through. Some looked ashamed to be there. Most didn't. They watched like they'd watched the weather. A few chuckled. One man scratched his beard and said, "Hell, $3? That ain't even the price of a saddle strap." "She eat much," someone else called. "She don't talk, far as I can tell," the auctioneer said. "Probably don't eat much neither." Limei said nothing. The wind pulled at her skirt, wrapped it around her knees like even the air wanted to hide her. Then came the sound. Hoofbeats. Slow and steady. Like they weren't in any hurry to meet trouble, but wouldn't turn away from it either. From the edge of town came a rider, tall in the saddle, coat the color of dried blood. The kind of man you don't wave at unless you're sure he'll wave back. Thomas Cade. A few in the crowd stepped aside. Instinct more than respect. Cade rode like the land belonged to him, and the grave wasn't in any rush to take him. He dismounted without a word, his boots landing in the dirt like two full stops at the end of a sentence. He looked at the girl, looked at the crowd, then up at the auctioneer. $3, he said. The auctioneer grinned, relieved. "Right. $3. We got a bid. Anyone. Not for her." A beat. Cade stepped forward, removed his hat. The wind took a breath. "She don't get bought," he said. "Not today." The crowd stiffened. "Well now, Mr. Cade," the auctioneer said slowly. "This here's illegal." "She's a child," Cade said, voice flat as a board. "You can call it legal all you want, but I seen things done by law that still turned a man's stomach." "What are you planning, then?" "She'll come with me." Laughter bubbled from someone near the back. "You taking her in like a stray dog, Cade?" Cade's eyes didn't move. "She'll work the ranch if she wants. Or she won't. But she'll have my land when I'm gone. Not as property. As heir. That shut the town up good and proper." The girl turned, just slightly. Her eyes found his. Dark as creaked stone. "Hell," someone muttered. "She don't even speak your tongue." "Land don't speak neither," Cade said. "Still knows how to be kept." The auctioneer scratched the back of his neck. "Now I don't rightly know if that's how this works, Mr. Cade." Cade stepped to the crate, looked down at the girl, spoke quiet. "You hungry?" She didn't answer. Didn't have to. Her hands were trembling. He held out his hand. She stared at it, like it might vanish, or like she might. Then, slow, she stepped down. When her feet touched the dirt, the wind picked up, spun through town in a slow circle hush, like it had seen this moment long ago and waited all this time to breathe it in. Together, they walked toward the horse. A few watched. Most turned away. The auctioneer packed his papers in silence. And far above, on the canyon's lip, the hawks circled like they always had. High, slow, eternal. Later, folks would say that was the moment the town changed. They wouldn't know how or why. Just that the air tasted different. Like something that had been broken had started to heal. And somewhere, buried deep in that girl's silence, the seed of a new story began to grow. The ranch didn't welcome. It waited. One windmill spun with a limp creak. The wooden gate hung at a tilt. Fence posts leaned like tired men. Beyond it, the land stretched dry and hard toward the horizon. Brown hills, thistle tufts, and sky like a sun-scorched lid. Lee May stepped down from the saddle, legs stiff from the ride. She didn't reach for Cade's hand when he offered it, but she didn't flinch either. Cade led her past the empty corral, past the chicken coop, where only two hens scratched like they didn't notice they were alone. The barn door hung open. A hammer lay forgotten on the porch rail. He opened the front door. Inside smelled of wood smoke, leather, and something faintly sweet, something long ago. The furniture was worn, but clean. A cracked teacup sat beside a Bible no one had touched in years. Cade pointed to a chair by the hearth. "You can sit." She did, folding her legs beneath her without a word. He brought her water in a tin cup, then bread. She ate slowly, not like she didn't trust it, like she wanted to make it last. Outside, the wind shifted. Somewhere, a coyote howled, long and thin. The days passed like wind through barbed wire, slow, tense, humming with things unsaid. She swept the porch without being told, carried water in both arms, even when it sloshed down her sleeves. She didn't smile, didn't speak, but she watched, always watched. One morning, Cade caught her crouched by the edge of the field with a tiny seed cupped in her palm. She pressed it into the dry earth, like it was gold. He didn't stop her, just stood there and wondered what it was she thought might grow out here. That night, she placed a folded cloth on the table. Inside it, half a biscuit she'd saved from dinner. He didn't eat it, but he left it there until morning. On the fifth day, the dog barked. A rider approached. Thin man, slick hat, bad eyes. Name was Finch. Banker's man. Rode like he knew how to draw a line and how to cross one if paid enough. He dismounted slow. Spat near the rose bush Cade's wife had planted years ago. "Morning, Tom." Cade stood on the porch, thumb tucked into his belt. "Finch, got word from town. Heard you picked up a stray." Cade said nothing. Finch smirked. "Some folks think that land you're on might be better served in steadier hands, seeing as how you've got no kin. I've got hands. I've got earth. That's all a ranch needs." "Well now," Finch said, drawing out the words, "some might argue a girl like that don't count as kin. Not legally. Not proper." Lee May stood behind the door, watching through the crack. Her fingers curled tight around the wood. "I don't care what some might argue," Cade said. "Thing is," Finch went on, tapping the porch rail like he owned it, "if something were to happen, say you fell sick, or your roof caught fire again, you sure that girl knows how to sign a deed? Or speak for the land?" "She'll learn." Finch tipped his hat. "You always were a damn romantic, Tom." "Get off my land." Finch hesitated, then smiled. "Clock's ticking, Cade. Winter comes fast. Some of us got plans for that acreage." He left without looking back. The dust he kicked up didn't settle until sunset. That night, Cade lit the oil lamp and found Lee May sitting cross-legged on the floor with a pencil in her hand and a book open on her lap. A dictionary. One of his. She traced letters like she was carving them into stone. He watched her from the doorway. She didn't look up. "You ever write your name before?" She nodded once, then pointed at the page where she'd scrawled something small, careful. "Lee May." Next to it, she'd written a second word. "Home." Cade's throat tightened, but he didn't let it show. "That's a good word." She looked at him, eyes shadowed in lampglow, and whispered something too soft to hear. He didn't ask her to repeat it. A week later, the chicken coop burned. Cade saw the glow before he heard the crack of wood. By the time he ran out with a blanket, it was already gone, smoke rising like a ghost into the black sky. The hens were lost. The coop, nothing but charred splinters. No sign of a storm. No lightning. Just fire. He stood there with his fists clenched. Lee May stood beside him, barefoot in the dirt, holding a tin pail full of water too late to matter. Her face didn't cry. It didn't change at all. But her hands shook. He didn't say who he thought did it. She didn't ask. They buried the ashes together in silence. The next day, Cade found her in the barn, holding something wrapped in cloth. She opened it. His wife's hairbrush. He stared at it for a long time. Thought he'd buried it deep in a drawer. Lee May handed it to him, eyes lowered. "No," he said gently. "You keep it." She looked up, startled. "It belonged to someone who used to make things grow here," he said. "I think maybe you will too." She nodded, small, sure, then turned and walked back toward the garden where nothing ever grew. That evening, storm clouds rolled over the far canyon. Dark ones. Not rain. Not yet. Just the kind that hung heavy with promise. The wind picked up again, colder now. The kind of wind that knocked shutters loose and whispered names not spoken in years. Cade stood on the porch, watching the horizon. Behind him, Lee May was setting the table. 2 bowls. Water. Bread. She placed the dictionary beside her seat. Outside, the dog growled low. In town, men were talking. And in the sky, the storm finally began to gather. The storm came down like it had been waiting years to arrive. No rain at first. Just wind, cruel and low, dragging sand and smoke across the land like a curtain. By noon, the sky had gone copper-gray and mean, and the hills disappeared into the swirl. Lee May stood in the yard with her arms wrapped tight around herself. Cade came out of the barn, wiping oil from his hands. "Get inside," he said. She didn't move, just pointed. There, along the ridge trail, 3 riders. Too neat, too fast, not lost. Cade squinted, jaw hardening. Finch, he turned back into the barn, reappeared with the shotgun, old, rusted, but clean where it counted. Lee May flinched at the sight of it. He saw that. "This ain't for shooting," he muttered. "It's for convincing." The horses slowed as they neared the gate. Finch led them, wearing the same smirk as always, but tighter now, like he was rehearsing something unpleasant. "You make a damn fine silhouette, Cade," he called. "Almost looks like you're still relevant. Don't recall sending for guests." "Didn't come for tea." Finch dismounted, boots crunching gravel. "Town council's changed its mind about that arrangement you made. Girl's not blood. No papers. No will. And you're just one bad cough from a coffin." One of the other men, tall, coat dragging the dust, eyed the barn like it was already his. "You boys ride out here just to deliver threats. Or is there an offer buried somewhere in the manure?" Finch stepped closer. "We're offering time. You sign over the land. Half now. Half when you're ready to leave it. Girl gets safe passage. Maybe even a train ticket. Or," he let it hang. The wind filled in the space with a long, low whistle through the fence rails. Cade looked past him. Adley May standing behind the screen door. She hadn't moved. Not an inch. "You ever had to look someone in the eye?" Cade said slowly. "And tell them they're a burden?" Finch blinked. "I have," Cade went on. "Once. Years back. It was the last thing I said to my wife before she died." Nobody spoke. He turned to Lee May. "Get the papers." She didn't move. "It's all right. Bring him." She stepped back inside. Finch exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath. "You're making the smart choice, Tom." But Cade didn't answer. He was staring at the dirt, at the chicken coop's scorched bones, at the ash buried under the garden's dry rose. Lee May returned, held out a folder, stiff and silent. But instead of handing it to Finch, Cade took it, ripped it clean down the spine. Paper fluttered like dry wings across the porch. Finch's smile dropped. "I gave her this land the day I took her in," Cade said. "You can burn my coop. You can lie in council meetings. But this ranch don't recognize your kind of ownership." Finch's hand hovered near his coat. "Tom, you're making this harder than it needs to be." "I intend to." The standoff stretched. Then the tall one moved, reached for something at his hip. That was the mistake. Cade's shotgun didn't fire, but it did cock loud enough to crack the air. "Try it," Cade growled, "and this land will get another grave." The man froze. Finch raised a hand, forced a smile. "No need for blood. We'll go." Cade nodded. "Good. But this ain't over." "No," Cade said, voice dry as dust. "It's just beginning." Finch turned, mounted, spat into the dirt. The riders vanished into the storm like ghosts refusing to pass on. That night, the wind wailed. The roof groaned like it remembered other storms. The fireplace crackled low. Cade sat in the rocker, boots off, arms heavy. Li Mei sat cross-legged on the rug, flipping pages in a book she hadn't read aloud yet. He watched her. "You could have walked away," he said softly. She didn't look up. "Back in town, when I first stepped up, you could have run." She turned the page. "Why didn't you?" Silence. Then, "Because you said I would own land." Her voice, so rare, so quiet, fell like a feather through a canyon. He nearly missed it. "And because," she closed the book, "you didn't look at me like I was broken." He looked down. Hands gnarled from years of mending fences. Voice worn from silence. "I was," she added. "But you didn't look at me that way." They sat there, the wind pressing against the windows, the house holding steady like an old boat. After a long while, Kate said, "They'll come again." Li Mei nodded. "I'll need to teach you how to mark the deeds proper." She nodded again. "And how to bluff when you're scared." "I already know that," she whispered. Kate didn't smile, but something in him softened. He reached for the old hairbrush on the table, held it out to her. "Start with this," he said. She took it with both hands. Outside, the wind didn't slow. The storm wasn't over. But inside, something had shifted, not like thunder, but like roots pushing deep into dry earth. Nothing else was said, but everything had changed. The rains never came. The clouds that once looked like promise had passed over in the night, leaving nothing but silence and soil dry enough to crack under your step. Days rolled by like tumbleweeds, light, useless, fast, and every breath felt like you were swallowing dust. Cade's boots thudded against the barn floor as he carried the last bale to the corner stall. The animals were long gone, sold or dead, but the habits remained. He still opened the door at dawn, still checked the hinges, still walked the fence line. Li Mei followed, not out of duty, but rhythm. That's how grief moved on the prairie, not loud. Just one silent task after another. 2 weeks after the standoff, Cade rode to town. The road to Saddle Bend was emptier than usual. No wagon tracks, no buzz of cattle, just wind as always, and the memory of hooves behind him that weren't there. He tied his horse outside the general store. The bell above the door jingled soft as he stepped in. Clara, the shopkeeper, looked up and stiffened. "Didn't expect to see you, Cade." "I need seed," he said. "Winter wheat. And oats." Her mouth twitched. "You planning a harvest or a funeral?" Cade didn't blink. "Both, maybe." She boxed the seed without a word. Behind him, 3 townsfolk lingered, whispering. He knew the tone. Not hate. Not quite. Something colder, suspicion. The kind bred by men too cowardly to look you in the eye, but brave enough to spread rumors. He paid in coin. As he turned to leave, Clara said, "That girl's still with you?" He paused. "She is." "She speak English now?" "She speaks land." Clara nodded once, lips pressed thin. "Don't let Finch corner you again." "I don't intend to." But outside, near the stables, he saw the sign freshly painted. Land dispute pending. Territory Council seized right of review. They hadn't stopped, just circled wider. Cade mounted and rode back through the dust, the storm now behind him, but the damage still settling. That evening, Li Mei set a tin cup on the porch rail. Cade sat beside it, rubbing his shoulder. "You hurt?" she asked, careful with her words. "Old bones," he muttered. "Weather feels heavy." She nodded and sat. The silence between them had changed, not heavy anymore, just full. "The town," she said slowly. "They want you to lose." "I know." She looked out toward the field. The seed Cade had sown hadn't sprouted. The ground was too dry. Or maybe it was still deciding whether to trust them. "They want me to lose too," she said. "But I can't go back." "You're not going back." She studied his face. "Why?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned forward, took something from his pocket, a small, leather-bound notebook. He handed it to her. She opened it. Inside were pages filled with rough sketches, fences, water routes, garden layouts, notes in broken handwriting. At the center, a square plot marked Li Mei's acre. She stared at it. "I've been watching how you move around the land," he said. "You don't step like a stranger anymore. You step like you belong." Tears didn't come. She didn't allow them anymore. but her fingers trembled just enough to betray what her face wouldn't. Cade took off his hat, laid it on his knee. I had a wife once. Strong woman. Harder than this land. We buried 2 kids before she passed, and after that, I figured nothing new would grow. He looked at her. I was wrong. The next morning, they rode the land. She rode his old mare. Cade walked beside her, leading the way toward the North Ridge, land he hadn't worked in years. The soil was rougher, rockier, but beneath the top layer it was darker. He knew where the water sat, hidden deep, but still there. They stopped at a flat bend near the canyon. This is where you start, he said. She looked around, nothing but rock, sky, and silence. But she could see it. The outline of a fence, the idea of a garden, a cabin maybe. Someday. This is yours now, he said. She didn't speak. Just stepped down, touched the ground with both palms like she was making a vow. Cade watched her. A gust of wind stirred the dust. Somewhere in it, a memory passed of flames, of deals made in whispers, of the sound a door makes when it's about to be kicked in. We'll be back by dark, Cade said. But I wanted you to see what they can't take. Lime looked up at him. They'll come again, she said. Cade nodded. We'll be ready. They turned back, horses walking slow. The sun behind them now, the road ahead blurred by heat and dust. But the path was clear. There'd be no lawyers, no more meetings. Next time, when they came, whether with papers or fire, they wouldn't be met with a plea. They'd be met with land that had already chosen its people. The wind came down the canyon early that morning, sharp and fast, like it had someplace to be. The kind of wind that made doors creak open on their own and set horses restless in their stalls. Cade stood in the parlor, shaving with a dull knife and a cracked mirror. He moved slow, careful, not because he feared the blade, but because he didn't believe in rushing the start of something final. Lime was already dressed. She'd been up since before the sun, sweeping the porch with wide, even strokes like she was clearing a path for whatever was coming. She wore the same faded blue dress Cade's wife used to hang by the fire. It had taken months for her to wear it, not out of fear, but out of respect. Now she moved in it like it was armor. Outside, hooves pounded the dry road. They didn't speak. Finch rode in with 5 men. No more pretending. No more legal talk. No offers wrapped in polite threats. They came with rifles slung across their backs and dust masks covering their faces. Not outlaws, not lawmen, just the kind of men who thought law could be owned if you had enough land, enough fear in your pocket. Cade met them at the gate unarmed. Lime stood behind him, notebook in hand. The real deed. Her name at the bottom, Cade's shaky scrawl as witness. The document that had no standing in a courtroom, but carried the full weight of something older, promise, sacrifice, and choice. You always were stubborn, Finch said, reining in. Should have sold years ago. You always were stupid, Cade replied. Should have learned when to walk away. Finch spat. Move. No. One of the men raised his rifle. That's when Lime stepped forward. She held the notebook out in both hands. Open. Her name on the page clear as canyon light. This is my land, she said. Her voice was firm, unshaking. The same voice that once whispered fear now spoke like thunder buried in stone. Finch laughed, sharp and hollow. That paper don't mean a damn thing, girl. Not to you, she said, but to this land it does. He started to speak again, some insult, some tired lie, but a shot rang out before the words left his mouth. It didn't hit anyone, just a warning. Sheriff Ed Thorne stepped out from the ridge behind them, rifle still smoking. He was old, slower than he used to be, but he wore the badge today, polished like it still meant something. Town council voted last night. He called. Not your land anymore, Finch. You pushed too far. Finch turned, furious. You got no right. We got signatures, witnesses, and I've got enough bullets to keep you off this land till the next century. The silence that followed wasn't just fear. It was the sound of something breaking, a hold, a pattern, a long, ugly era. Finch looked down at Cade, at Lime. He knew. He'd lost. He reined his horse around. This ain't over. Cade stepped forward, face calm. It is. Finch stared at him, eyes burning, but said nothing. The others followed, slow at first, then faster. Men already rewriting the story they'd tell about today. The sound of hooves faded into the hills, and the wind moved on. The sheriff walked up to them, tipped his hat. "Can't say I expected it to end quiet," he said. Cade nodded. "Didn't end. Just changed." He looked at Lee May. "You still got that copy?" She nodded, held it close to her chest. Ed looked at her a long moment, then smiled, a slow, respectful thing. "Well," he said, "I'll let the town know, and I'll get the new survey filed." She reached out and shook his hand. He tipped his hat again and walked away. Later that evening, Cade and Lee May sat on the porch, watching the sky turn gold. The old windmill creaked once, then fell still. The ranch was quiet again, but it wasn't the same silence. Lee May held the deed in her lap. The ink had smudged some, but the names were still there, still real. Cade leaned back in his chair, exhaling slow. "You ever think it'd turn out like this?" she asked. He thought a moment. "No," he said, "but I hoped." She looked down at the ground. "I don't know what to do next." "Good," he said. "Means it's yours." She nodded, then smiled. It wasn't big. It wasn't loud. But it was real. Some stories end in fire. Others end with the sound of a train rolling west. But some, the ones worth passing on, end quiet, in the last light of day, with nothing more than paper, wind, and a name that no one can take away. And somewhere in that dust, a girl no one bid for finally stood tall enough to cast her own shadow.